In this video, I'm going to talk about this relatively new case from Corsair, the Frame 4000D. It is actually the successor of the previous 4000D model that has been one of the most popular and best-selling Corsair cases for a couple of years now. And I guess they just wanted to do a proper refresh and then see if they can match the success of that old version. So let's see what Corsair put together here, how well this case performs, and if it's worth getting it or not. Let's begin. I think that design is one of the best aspects of this case. It is clearly airflow focused, which I think a lot of people are looking for. And while it is still a typical mid-size, mid-tower sort of a case, at its core, it does look modern and pretty attractive. The front panel has this interesting twisted pattern that really stands out, while still being mostly open for the air to easily pass through. And the rest of the panels use the same shapes in their design, which looks very balanced and definitely gives a very good first impression overall. And yes, looks are subjective and we all have our own taste, but I do think that this design will appeal to a large number of people, and then especially so at the price point of about $95 or 100 euros for just the case alone, or $110 or 115 euros for a model with 3 addressable RGB fans. Now, if you prefer, you can get it in black as well, but as you can see, for this video, I use the white version with 3 addressable RGB fans. Now, the front I/O is a nice upgrade over the old 4000D. The previous version had one USB 3.1 Type-C connection and one USB 3.0 Type-A, while this new case has 2 USB 3.2 Gen 1 Type-A ports and a single 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C connection. And I really like that now it is actually positioned at the front of the case, which is perfect for anyone that likes to have their PC on their desk. It makes it much more accessible, and I think it looks much nicer than having cables and dongles just sticking out of the top. But if you prefer to have your PC on the floor, then this might not be the best location for your front I/O. Now, even though the first impression of this case is quite good because the design of this case is very appealing, I have to admit that I was quite disappointed when I started to remove some of the panels. They're just not built as well as I expected the panels on a $100-ish case to be. The top panel especially feels so thin and so flimsy, and it just bulges to the slightest of touches. I really like having a little plant or some Lego on top of my PC, for example, and if you do that, you can see how easily the panel bends, even with something very light. The little panel on the side is also very thin, but it doesn't bend as much because it is smaller, but the right side panel has the same issue. On top of that, there are quite a few inconsistencies and gaps between the panels all around, and it is not as bad as Dimitri from Hardware Canucks showed in his video, but it is still very much so present and definitely not great. The front panel does feel solid, so as long as you don't touch the other panels and just look at them from a distance, it might not bother you, but in my opinion, they're just not at the level that I expect to see when I buy a $100 Corsair case. Now, if you compare it to the 3500X, for example, that is at a similar-ish price point, the panel quality of the 3500X is just better. Anyway, you can take all the panels off easily without any tools or any over-tightened thumb screws. And behind the front panel, you get a nice and fine dust filter in front of the intake fans, and you get a small dust filter on the bottom that can be removed from the side, which is very nice because you don't have to move your case to reach it. There is a simple magnetic dust filter on the right side panel, but unfortunately, the top panel doesn't have any sort of dust filters at all, and the holes are big enough for dust to fall in, which shouldn't be a problem if you just fill it with outtake fans, but if you don't, it might let a lot of dust through. So in my opinion, a very simple dust filter would have been enough, same like on the right side panel, for example. and it wouldn't cost them that much to add it. Since this is a modular case, you can actually remove most parts of it. So the panels come off, the PSU cover can be removed for easier cable management, the panel next to the motherboard can be removed and replaced with a bracket for mounting 3 fans instead, and even the entire motherboard tray can be removed if you wish to do so. And instead of offering a lot of mounting options using more traditional brackets that just have a lot of screw holes, Corsair added what they call their InfiniRail system, which lets you move some parts around so you can use different fans or radiator sizes without having a bunch of extra metal to interfere with the airflow or with the way it looks. And that is a nice feature, I would say, and it is a nice idea. But if you just get an RGB case with fans like I did right here, you barely need to do any adjustments. But the option is there and you can use it if you want to. When it comes to compatibility, you can fit a 360mm radiator on the top, front, or the side of the case, or you can move the InfiniRails to make space for 280mm radiators or 140mm fans if you prefer. Now technically you can even make space for 200mm fans in the front, but those don't make much sense, and doing 320mm ones is a much better option in my opinion. You can also fit CPU coolers of up to 170mm in height and GPUs up to 430mm in length. So again, most parts on the market should be able to fit this case without any issues. Now, I wanted to stress this Frame 4000D as much as possible to see how it would handle a proper high-end build. And since I have the white case, I went with the new RTX 5090 Aorus Master Ice graphics card that goes really well with the Z890 Aorus Pro motherboard. And for the CPU, I went with the Intel Core 9 285K with the Corsair iQ Link Titan RX water cooler on top of it. For the memory, I have this matching Dominator titanium kit. And to power it all up, I have the Corsair RM1000X Shift power supply, also in white. Now, ideally, I would strongly recommend you get a higher wattage power supply for a system like this one, but I have this PSU and it should be just enough for this build. Now, from a building perspective, this is pretty much one of the easiest mid-tower cases to work with. All the panels are easily removable, as I said at the start, and you end up with a lot of space to work with without anything being in your way. Cables are mostly pre-routed, and the 3 addressable RGB fans in the front of the case are nicely daisy-chained with the cables already bundled up. So all you have to do is plug 1 fan and 1 addressable RGB connection to your motherboard and you are done. I also really appreciate that basically every single part and every single cable are also white, just like the case. And the cable cover does its job of hiding most things out of sight well. In the bag, there is plenty of space for cable management, so you can be really lazy when it comes to that. But what I really like is that the case comes with a small but very effective GPU holder. With the GPUs getting so large and so heavy, a GPU holder is necessary so you can get some weight off of the motherboard. That being said, my GPU holder was actually flying around the case when it arrived, which probably happened in shipping, and I could not find one of the screw parts because it was hidden behind a panel and stuck to a magnet, and it took me an embarrassing amount of time to actually find it. So I do think that Corsair should either check if they're installed right before shipping the case or just add a holder to the accessories box instead. That would be ideal. Now, looking at the thermal performance while running Cyberpunk 2077, that nicely stresses both the GPU and the CPU, and with the noise normalized at 40 decibels at a 50 centimeter distance, the build was holding up pretty well. The GPU was pulling 600 watts exactly with its temp at 71 degrees Celsius and memory temp of 74 degrees Celsius on average. The CPU was pulling 180 watts and showed 59 degrees Celsius on average. The internal case temperature was at 39 degrees, and I usually think that 40 degrees is a nice target maximum for a case that performs well, but with a 600 watt GPU, I actually think that the thermals looked excellent and a bit better than I thought they would. While only stressing the CPU, there was no issues either, with the water cooler moving most of the heat right out of the case. With 75 degrees on the CPU with a 242 watt average load, and with most of the other thermals looking
more like you would expect from a system running a light load or being in idle. And if a case can handle a 600-watt RTX 5090 without any issues, it can definitely handle other more typical and more reasonable builds easily. So you don't have to worry about performance at all. Let's circle back to the modularity of this case, which seems to be a very strong key point from their marketing perspective. And even though I think this is a very good idea in theory, I also think it is a huge stretch to call this a modular case at the moment, because while the panels and some parts are removable and they are mentioning different front panels, different motherboard trays and so on, none of these things are available just yet. Not a single thing. They apparently expect that some of those accessories will be available in the summer, but right now, this is pretty much all you get. Removable panels, which a lot of other cases can also do without being called modular. Now, I'm also a bit worried about the cost of these modules when they do come out. As a concept, I think it would fit a higher end case much better, where a bit more budget to get something more fitting won't make that much of a difference. While on a $100 case, getting a front I/O upgrade, for example, and a different front panel could easily add 50% more to the price. And then just getting a $150 case instead with a feature that you need and a better build quality would be a more reasonable choice, in my opinion. So I really do wish that they added at least a glass front panel, for example, or a wood front panel instead, to just give you a feeling that you are getting some sort of modularity and two different options right out of the box. Because right now, it is just a normal case and a bunch of promises. Anyway, here in the Netherlands, this case is being sold for about 100 euros for the version without any fans, or 115 for the version with 3 addressable RGB fans. Corsair does list a version with 3 non-RGB fans, but I don't see that option in the shops anywhere. In the US, it is about $95 for the base model, or $110 for the addressable RGB version. And between the two, it kind of depends on what kind of a build you have in mind, but in general, I think that a $15 premium for 3 addressable RGB fans is the better option, especially if you then combine it with a water cooler that has the same RS fans, for example, and you get a very high-end looking Corsair build without spending a fortune. But it also kind of leaves a question if the base model is a bit overpriced to begin with. So I really love the design of this case, like a lot, but I also do think they cut costs on the panel quality, and the finish is not as spotless as you usually expect from Corsair. But if you go for the fan version, I guess it kind of, balances out a bit more. And there are definitely a lot of good things to be said about this case as well. It has easily accessible filters, lots of space for cable management, lovely design overall, and some crucial features like a much needed GPU holder that actually works. And on top of that, it also performs really well, even with an RTX 5090 build. So at the end of the day, you have to decide for yourself if this case is meeting your expectations or not. And if the price actually drops a bit more, I'm sure it will still be one of the more popular and best-selling cases regardless. I just feel like they could have done a bit of a better job. That's it. Now, that's all I had for today, but before I go, let's check out the sponsor of this video. This video was brought to you by Seasonic and their Vertex power supplies. These fully modular power supplies are extremely efficient and very quiet due to their fan design and their hybrid fan mode that stops the fans completely under 40% load. They come with a variety of connections for any kind of system you have in mind, including the 12-volt high-power cable for the latest NVIDIA graphics cards. And to wrap it all up, they now offer a nice and cozy 12-year-long warranty. Check them out using the links in the description below. Thank you all for watching and staying to the end. I really hope you liked this video. If you did and you want to see more videos like this one, please do consider clicking that subscribe button so you never miss my future uploads. Bye guys, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!